On this Saturday night, the first pope to resign in 600 years dies at the age of 95. A look at the unusual legacy of Pope Benedict XVI.
This was a loving, holy man.
Tributes for a trailblazing journalist.
Is this news to you?
No, it's not news.
How fearless interviewer Barbara Walters is being remembered by the generations of journalists she inspired. Real estate forecast, the wild card that Canadian economists will have their eye on in 2023. Philanthropy at any age.
You don't have to be rich, you don't have to be super smart, you just have to be kind.
The 9-year-old cancer survivor being recognized for her generous spirit.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Sonia Sunger.
Decade after resigning as Pope, former Pontiff Benedict died today, just days after the public was told the 95-year-old's health was declining. In his first public comments, his successor, Pope Francis, called him a gift to the world and described him as noble and kind. The Pope will preside over his funeral on Thursday, to be held in St. Peter's Square. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Reaction to the former Pope's death is pouring in from all over. There are mixed feelings about Benedict, who was extremely conservative in his views. His leadership also happened at a time when the Catholic Church had a reckoning over abuse. Eric Sorensen takes a look back at his life.
Pope Benedict XVI made history as both first and last. The first pope in 600 years to retire from the papacy, and the last in a 1,000-year succession of European pontiffs. Joseph Ratzinger was ordained a Catholic priest in Germany almost 70 years ago. A church scholar, he was appointed Bishop of Munich. As Archbishop under Pope John Paul II, Ratzinger led the powerful Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which ultimately dealt with the sexual abuse by priests.
I think Benedict will wear that as part of his legacy. We know that he had a hand in deciding the policies of how the Church handled and mishandled this really serious issue.
Benedict tried to show the Church as modern and relevant. He was the first pope to tweet and the first to place a call to astronauts in space.
Dear astronauts, I'm very happy to have this extraordinary opportunity.
Non era vuota, non era invano, ma che...
But he also steered the Church on a traditional path, opposing abortion, divorce, and gay marriage. He sought to restore faith where it was threatened by secularism.
Ad conditionem certam perveni.
But there was nothing traditional about his decision to retire. It was unheard of in modern times.
He, in a very human moment, admitted that the onerous task of the papacy was too much and that he would resign and make way for the election of a new pope.
Yet, living on as Pope Emeritus, his presence challenged his successor, the more liberal Pope Francis.
Arrivederci.
Francis was tolerant of gay marriage.
Una persona gay.
Who am I to judge, he said. But Benedict, in a later biography, viewed gay marriage as part of an anti-Christian creed. Throughout this period, the church sex abuse scandal continued to widen.
We're in control of this, it'll never happen again.
Conservatives used the scandal and the views of Benedict to undermine Francis. Benedict not only blazed a trail for future popes to retire, but defined a new position of power in the Catholic Church.
Does this set up an alternate center of authority, let's say, in the Vatican? So I think that the way that retired popes live and speak and have a public presence will be one that's questioned in the future.
Pater.
Pope Benedict has given the Catholic Church much to think about and a highly unusual legacy. The Pope who reigned and the Pope who resigned. Eric Sorensen, Global News.
Canadian members of the Catholic Church are also reacting to the death of Pope Benedict. Cardinal Thomas Collins says he will be remembered as a shy and scholarly man.
Well, I think he will be remembered as a great pope, as a great leader, spiritual leader, very holy man, but I think in a very particular way. His writings will continue down for centuries and centuries yet to come. I would not be surprised if he's called what we call a doctor of the church. One of the great teachers like St. Thomas Aquinas or St. Teresa of Avila or St. John of the Cross. And so that's a way in which he has helped us, and I think that will continue especially.
Canadian Cardinal Mark Ouellet also commenting on Benedict's death tonight in Rome, telling media he was a man who was able to reflect on the relation between faith and the evolution of culture. Benedict's body will lie in state in St. Peter's Basilica on Monday until his funeral. Now to another loss being felt around the world. Tributes are pouring in for TV pioneer Barbara Walters. She died Friday at the age of 93. Walters was a fearless interviewer, known for asking tough questions to some very famous people. Jennifer Johnson looks back at the extraordinary career of Barbara Walters.
Barbara Walters built a career of firsts. She was the first female co-host of NBC's Today Show, the first female to co-anchor a network nightly newscast.
Barbara Walters.
And she hosted what is still one of the most watched television news programs ever, her sit-down interview with former White House intern Monica Lewinsky about her affair with former President Bill Clinton.
Why did you tell Linda Tripp about this dress?
Because it was funny. It was funny.
Throughout her career, Walters proved she had the grit to ask the tough questions and never winced when she got back uncomfortable answers.
It wasn't an affair, it wasn't love, it was sex.
Walters never shied away from grilling disgraced politicians, world leaders, and beloved celebrities, including Princess Grace.
Your Highness, I must ask you the question that most Americans want to know about you. Are you happy?
Tributes to Walters have flooded social media. Oprah Winfrey writing, "Without Barbara Walters, there wouldn't have been me." Basketball great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar tweeting, "Barbara Walters never flinched when questioning the world's most powerful people. She held them accountable." Katie Couric writing, "Her body of work is unparalleled." And tennis superstar Billie Jean King calling Walters a true trailblazer.
Barbara Walters!
Walters launched the talk show The View in 1997, which is still on the air. On the day she signed off, fellow journalists honored her for paving the way for their own careers in an industry once dominated by men.
This is my legacy. These are my legacy.
Her legacy also included a slew of Emmy nominations and wins, 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards, and her own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
I'm Barbara Walters, and this is my show, The 10 Most Fascinating People.
Walters was the woman who got to ask the famous questions we all wanted to ask and brought those conversations into our homes. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Breaking news out of Ottawa tonight. Starting next week, the federal government will require COVID-19 testing for travelers coming into Canada from China, Hong Kong, and Macau. The measures follow similar rules from other countries, including the U.S. and Japan, as China grapples with a surge of the virus. Canada's new measures come into effect on Thursday. Many people around the world are already celebrating the new year with loved ones, but those in Ukraine are doing so under the shadow of Russia's war. Another wave of Russian missiles struck the country on New Year's Eve, damaging residential areas and killing at least 1 person in Kyiv, as Ukrainians enter another year of enduring Moscow's invasion. Sean O'Shea has more.
For Ukrainians facing 2023 still defending a Russian invasion, the end can't come soon enough. I would really like this year to be over, says Oksana Morozenko. Finding joy here isn't easy. It's New Year's and it makes me feel sad, her mother chimes in, as Russian airstrikes once again fall on Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky said the world will never forgive the terror. Ukraine, he said, will never forgive Russia. In Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin drank a toast with soldiers and gave out medals. His defiant defense minister claims Russia's victory, like the new year, is inevitable. While Ukraine's defense minister released this video, a letter to Santa, thanking the West for weapons and asking for more.
I hope you don't mind that we generously shared some of your gifts with our deranged northern neighbor, who behaved very badly this year.
Russia and Ukraine did exchange prisoners in time for the new year. 82 Russians and 140 Ukrainians seen here. And other soldiers, many fighting since February, came home by train to Kyiv for New Year's.
With books, tea, and really cozy atmosphere. It's really
and
cool.
Candles, of course.
Candles, of course.
Just to be together.
Just us, nothing else.
The country's collective hope, Tamara Kovalova says Ukraine wants victory and peace as it inches to culminating one full year at war. Sean O'Shea, Global News.
Still ahead, the state of Canada's housing market. What's in store for home buyers next year? This year started with a bang, at least in terms of home prices, but saw a major shift as interest rates went way up. Anne Gaviola has a preview of what's in store for the Canadian housing market in 2023.
The housing market is closing out 2022 with a whimper. November saw nearly 40% fewer home sales compared to the year before and 13% fewer than the 10-year pre-pandemic average.
I'll pull out my crystal ball and take a look.
Drawing on 25 years' worth of experience, this real estate brokerage owner says the Calgary market is poised to see prices climb in the first half of 2023 as Alberta's economy booms, attracting buyers from more expensive areas in BC and Ontario.
We have so little inventory. Anecdotally, I was talking to a realtor this morning that said she's finding more and more buyers are writing backup offers on properties simply because there is such a lack of inventory.
Across Canada, Royal LePage expects the median price of a single-family detached house to fall 2% to $781,000 and a 1% price slide for condos to nearly $569,000. Toronto and Montreal area prices forecast to fall 2%, Calgary and Regina down 1.5%, and Vancouver down 1%. Even though the cost of borrowing has soared, high savings and high employment rates can keep home prices from falling too much.
If you're one of those people who has been listening to some of the bears from other sectors who are suggesting home prices are going to drop 30 or 40%, you may be disappointed. The math just doesn't work.
Real estate analysts don't expect big changes in the Toronto area housing market. Realtor Nazma Ali describes the market right now as extremely slow. People who don't have to sell aren't. But if interest rates keep soaring or if the economy takes a tumble, the market could take a turn for the worse.
And if it continues this way, we're probably going to see more houses and condos and listings hitting the market for sale. Whereas what we've seen so far is not enough desperate people to sell.
Most experts expect a return to a more seasonal pre-COVID market where prices and activity pick up in the spring. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Coming up, a look at a year of advocacy on missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. Have the calls to action been answered? Thousands of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people have gone missing or been murdered in Canada, and many of those cases were not properly investigated by police. The stories of victims' families across the country came to a head earlier this month in Winnipeg, where an alleged serial killer was charged. 4 Indigenous women are believed to be his victims. They are the latest cases in a national tragedy advocates say isn't being met with the urgency or resources needed. Neetu Gutcha has a look back on some of their efforts over 2022 and their calls to action.
More than 100 people gathered in Winnipeg on December 4th calling for a national state of emergency to be declared for missing and murdered Indigenous victims.
There's a 2-tier system in Canada, that's really rooted in structural and systemic racism. There's one for non-Indigenous people, and there's one for Indigenous people.
Advocates here have long believed serial predators frequently target Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. Now they're combing through the cases of those who remain missing throughout the province, wondering how many more died at the hands of alleged serial killers, like the one handed 4 first-degree murder charges a few weeks ago. 2 of the bodies are believed to be buried in a local landfill, which police say they can't search alone, leaving grieving relatives pleading for help.
My mother didn't pass away with a home, so let's pay her the respect that she deserves by finally giving her one that's not a resting place at the Prairie Green landfill.
Cambria Harris's mother, Morgan, is one of at least 10 Indigenous women killed in Winnipeg this year. In northern BC, this notorious stretch of Highway 16 is known as the Highway of Tears. on account of the multitude of Indigenous women and girls who were murdered or have gone missing while traveling along it. Signs are still up with their posters and a warning for girls not to hitchhike.
When Greyhound pulled out, it was just a blow to everybody in Canada, especially Western Canada.
There are ongoing calls for a national, reliable and affordable bus system.
The most vulnerable that may not have the connections or not have the money that end up hitchhiking, and that's a very real threat. It's still something that we need to contend with.
Mary Teegee is helping direct the BC government's commitment of nearly $10 million for a Highway 16 action plan. It includes expanding transit options, using community vehicles through a grant program, and installing web cameras and bus shelters.
That action plan, I think, ought to be an exemplar across Canada, but they also should be looking at that action plan for the rest of the province of BC.
Red dresses have become a symbol for action and awareness. According to Stats Canada, nearly 1 in 10 victims of a violent crime in 2019 were Indigenous women, whose homicide rate is 6 times higher than that of non-Indigenous people.
Each woman deserved their own cover story.
A Toronto nonprofit created this newspaper featuring 4,000 cover stories honoring their lives.
We also wanted to define the magnitude in the physical paper itself. The paper weighs about 25 pounds, and that really demonstrates that if you captured the true story of each Indigenous woman who has been missing or murdered, you would see the heaviness of it.
It was delivered to the Prime Minister's office in the fall. Calls to urgently act on recommendations from the 2019 inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls have remained unanswered. Those calls include appeals to create a national Indigenous and human rights ombudsperson and a tribunal.
I hate to say it, and I didn't want to go there, but if it wasn't Indigenous women, would this already be happening? Because it's Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit and gender diverse. Is this why it's taking so long?
A spokesperson for the Crown Indigenous Relations Ministry told Global News in a written statement it's committed to accelerating efforts to implement the National Action Plan, the federal pathway, and the calls to justice, and that in January a national roundtable is being convened by the federal government, and there will be an update on the calls for an ombudsperson and a tribunal. The feds also say they're providing funding to the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs for a feasibility study of the Winnipeg landfills. Some also want to see accountability from the Catholic Church, which ran many of Canada's residential institutions. The issue was taken to the Vatican in the spring. Advocate Lorelei Williams says she paid her own way to Rome during the Indigenous delegation meetings with the Pontiff in hopes of raising awareness.
I've been out there on the front lines speaking about this so much. Nobody really listens to me because I'm at the bottom of the barrel. In Canada, Indigenous women are at the very bottom.
She did the same in Edmonton when the Pope came to Canada.
I feel like the Pope is not touching on it at all.
Back home in Vancouver, she helps families search and fight for justice for their loved ones. Wilson says they formed a coalition but have few resources.
Everybody just volunteers their time. So I'm thinking of, the women that go on searches. I'm thinking of the women that take up the role to do victims assistance. I'm thinking of the women and elders that go to the courts.
Some advocates here call it a clear national crisis and wonder why it isn't being treated like one. Neetu Garcha, Global News.
If you or someone you know is in need of help or support, you can call 1-844-413-6649. This is a national toll-free crisis line available 24/7 for anyone who requires emotional assistance related to missing and murdered Indigenous women. Next, a child cancer survivor gives back. The young Alberta girl that's being recognized for her fundraising efforts. A young Alberta girl is being recognized for her generous spirit despite fighting a battle of her own. She has raised thousands of dollars to help kids with cancer. And as Nicole Stilger explains, her philanthropy hasn't gone unnoticed.
It's news that would rock any family.
The worst thing you can ever hear is that your child has cancer.
At 6 years old, Cecily Eklund was diagnosed with a brain tumor. When treatment started, she wasn't allowed to bring her beloved doll to scans. So she and mom, Kathy Eklund, made some that were MRI friendly.
She didn't like going at the MRI machine without anything, and she found it very comforting.
It's scary because it has a lot of loud noises, and you have to stay still for a long time.
Cecily thought it might bring comfort for other kids going through this too. So she set out to make more and ended up getting help from all over the world.
We would have people send dolls from Australia and Mexico and the United States to help her build up a whole stash of dolls to bring into the stallery.
From there, her philanthropic spirit only grew. Through a number of different initiatives over the past couple of years, she's raised over $70,000 for the Kids with Cancer Society, a place that's been there for Cecily and her family from the start.
I like raising money because I love giving back.
To recognize Cecily's dedication and compassion, the Kids with Cancer Society nominated the 9-year-old for Outstanding Philanthropist of the Year, which she was ultimately awarded in November at the National Philanthropy Awards.
If I can help even one child with cancer by giving them hope, that's the story I want to tell.
Her speech included a powerful message.
You don't have to be rich, you don't have to be super smart, you just have to be kind.
I couldn't have been more proud. She's a pretty giving child.
Today, Cecily is cancer-free.
When you hit that relief of there's no tumor in the scan, you're just grateful.
And even in survivorship, the support from the Kids with Cancer Society continues, and so does Cecily's.
In March, we're doing a big birthday fundraiser to raise $10,000.
Nicole Stilger, Global News.
And that's Global National for this Saturday night on this New Year's Eve. I'm Sonia Sunger, and from all of us at Global, we wish you a Happy New Year. And on that note, we will leave you tonight with spectacular fireworks and vibrant celebrations that have already happened around the world to ring in 2023. Thanks for watching. I will see you again tomorrow. Good night.